I went to pull something out of my pantry last week and I stopped dead in my tracks. Right there on my phone. A recall notice for something I had been feeding my family for months. No big news story, no warning at the store, just a quiet government update that most people never see. And here's the thing. This is happening more and more in 2026, and almost nobody is paying attention. The number of food recalls in the United States has been climbing steadily, and the categories being hit are not what you'd expect. It's not just obscure brands or niche products, it's everyday items. Things sitting in your fridge right now. Things you buy every single week. I've spent the last few weeks going deep on this, reading FDA and USDA databases, tracking consumer alerts, talking to people who work in food distribution. And what I found genuinely surprised me. Not in a panic-inducing way, but in a, I really wish someone had told me this sooner kind of way. Today, I'm going to walk you through 10 items and categories you need to check, or at least know about, right now. And I'll tell you, number 7 on this list is the one that got me. I never would have guessed it. I'll get to it a little later, so stay with me. If you're new here, hit subscribe. I put out this kind of practical consumer content every week. No fluff, no hype. Just real information you can actually use. Let's get into it. Item number 1. Ready-to-eat deli meats. Let me start here because this one has been quietly making headlines for a long time, and the 2025 to 2026 wave has been particularly bad. Deli meats, sliced turkey, ham, roast beef, bologna, have been among the most frequently recalled food categories in recent years. The issue is almost always the same. Listeria contamination discovered after the product has already shipped to stores. Listeria is a bacteria that's particularly dangerous for pregnant women, older adults, and anyone with a weakened immune system. And unlike some pathogens, it can grow in refrigerated environments, so keeping it cold doesn't protect you. I looked at the FDA's recall database going back through 2025, and I lost count of how many deli meat recalls I found. Brand names you recognize. Sold at Walmart, Kroger, Costco. Products that looked perfectly fine and showed no signs of contamination. Here's what makes this so tricky. By the time a recall is announced, the product has often already been consumed. The shelf life on sliced deli meat is short, usually 5 to 7 days, and recalls often come days or weeks after distribution. What you can do right now is check the FDA's recall database directly. It takes 2 minutes. You type in the product category, and it shows you everything flagged in the last 60 days. If you buy pre-sliced deli meat regularly, this is a habit worth building. Check the database monthly, and if you can, buy whole cuts and slice them yourself. It's not always practical, but it significantly reduces your exposure. You don't want to find out the hard way. Item number 2. Bagged salads and leafy greens. This one hits close to home for a lot of people because it feels so counterintuitive. You're buying salad to be healthy. And then it ends up being the thing that makes you sick. Pre-washed, bagged leafy greens have had a persistent contamination problem for years. E. coli, Salmonella, Listeria, all have appeared in bagged salads at various points, and 2025 was no exception. The problem is a combination of factors. Large-scale processing facilities handle enormous volumes. Greens from multiple farms get mixed together. A contamination event at one source can affect thousands of bags across dozens of states. I noticed something when I started paying closer attention. The recalls on leafy greens often happen after people are already sick. The CDC investigates a cluster of illness reports, traces it back to a product, and by then, the bags are already in people's refrigerators. I spoke to someone who works in produce distribution, and they told me something I didn't expect. The triple-washed label on bagged salads is a marketing term, not a food safety certification. It gives people a false sense of security. Their advice to me was simple. If you're buying bagged greens, rinse them again yourself, even if the label says pre-washed. Check the brand and lot number against current recalls before you eat them, especially if you're serving them to vulnerable family members. Or consider switching to whole heads of lettuce that you wash and cut yourself. More work, but much less risk. Item number 3. Frozen waffles and breakfast items. This is one people don't expect. Frozen waffles feel like one of the safest things in your kitchen. Frozen, packaged, ready to heat and eat. What could go wrong? It turns out quite a bit. There have been multiple high-profile listeria contamination events tied to frozen breakfast items over the past few years. And in 2025, frozen waffles and pancakes from several well-known brands showed up in recall notices that I only found because I was specifically looking. These products move through households quickly. People buy them for their kids. They're eaten frequently. And the assumption that freezing kills bacteria is only partially true. Listeria can survive freezing. I'll be honest. I had a box of frozen waffles in my freezer when I first started researching this topic. I checked the lot number and it was fine. But the fact that I had to check it all changed how I think about buying these. What I've started doing is checking the lot number on frozen breakfast items when I get home from the store before they go into the freezer. Takes 30 seconds. I cross-reference with the FDA website. If it's clean, it goes in. If there's any flag, it goes back. It might sound paranoid, but these recalls are real, and the brands involved are ones you trust. Trustworthy brands still have contamination events. That's just the reality of large-scale food production. Item number 4. Canned and jarred foods with undeclared allergens. Now I want to shift the focus slightly because not all recalls are about bacteria. A growing category of food recalls involves undeclared allergens. This means the product contains an ingredient, milk, peanuts, tree nuts, wheat, soy, that is not listed on the label. For someone with a serious allergy, this is not an inconvenience. It can be life-threatening. The FDA has been flagging these recalls more aggressively in recent years as labeling standards get tighter. But that also means more products are getting caught. Canned soups, pasta sauces, jarred condiments, the recalls are spread across a huge variety of products. What concerns me about this category is that these items sit in pantries for months or even years. Someone buys a can of soup, puts it in the back of the cabinet, and forgets about it. A recall gets issued 6 months later. Nobody ever checks. I actually went through my own pantry after reading about this trend and found 2 items I'd had for over a year. Both were fine, but the exercise made me realize I had no idea what was back there or whether any of it had ever been flagged. The practical move here is to do a quarterly pantry audit. Take everything out. Check lot numbers on anything that's been sitting for more than 3 months and verify it against the recall database. It sounds tedious, but once you do it, it takes maybe 20 minutes. If you have a family member with food allergies, this is not optional. This is essential. Item number 5. Ground beef and beef products. Ground beef has one of the most consistent recall histories of any food in the United States. The culprit is almost always E. coli O157:H7, a strain that can cause severe illness, kidney failure, and in some cases death, particularly in young children and elderly adults. Ground beef processing involves combining meat from multiple animals, which means a single contamination event can spread through enormous quantities of product. A recall that sounds small, a few thousand pounds, might still represent tens of thousands of packages. I was looking at USDA recall records for 2024 and 2025, and the pattern is striking. Ground beef recalls happen throughout the year, not just in warm months. They happen at large processors and small ones, and they consistently involve products that were already sold to consumers before the recall was announced. What really shifted my behavior was learning about the retail source problem. Ground beef sold as store brand at a major supermarket might actually come from a large regional processor. When that processor issues a recall, the store brand gets pulled. But people don't always make that connection. My habit now is to cook ground beef to a minimum internal temperature of 160 degrees Fahrenheit every single time. No exceptions. A thermometer is cheap insurance. And I check the USDA's Food Safety and Inspection Service recall list before I plan a week of meals involving ground beef. Protect your family. Check before you cook. Item number 6. Infant formula and baby food. I want to spend a little more time on this one because the stakes are different. The 2022 infant formula crisis exposed how fragile the supply chain for baby food really is. And while the acute shortage has eased, the underlying issues have not fully resolved. Recalls of infant formula and baby food products have continued into 2025 and 2026. The contaminants vary. Sometimes it's a bacteria issue, sometimes it's foreign material, sometimes it's a labeling error involving nutrient content that sounds minor but can have real consequences for an infant whose only nutrition source is formula. I do not have young children at home, but I have family members who do. And when I started sharing what I was finding in my research, several of them told me they had no idea how to check recall status for their baby's formula. The FDA has a dedicated recall page, and you can sign up for email alerts by product category. If you have an infant in your household, signing up for those alerts should happen today, not tomorrow. Today. I also want to mention baby food pouches specifically. These have seen their own recall events related to elevated heavy metal levels. The science on long-term risk is still developing, but regulators have been increasingly vocal about this issue. For parents, vary the brands and types of baby food you use, check recalls before each shopping trip, and never dismiss a recall notice for baby products even if the stated risk sounds small. This is about your child. Don't leave it to chance. Item number 7. Pre-packaged nut butters and trail mix. I told you number 7 would surprise you. And I think it will, because this is one that almost nobody is watching. Nut butters, peanut butter, almond butter, sunflower seed butter, have been the subject of significant recalls tied to salmonella contamination. And trail mix, which often combines nuts, dried fruit and chocolate, carries the same risk profile. Here's what makes this one particularly concerning. People treat these products as shelf-stable health foods. They buy a big jar, leave it on the counter or in the pantry, and use it over weeks or months. If a recall is issued on week 2 of a 3-month jar, most people will never know. I actually checked my own pantry when I was putting this research together and found that I had a container of almond butter I'd been using for about 6 weeks. I looked up the lot number. It was fine, but I was genuinely not sure what I would have found. The salmonella outbreaks linked to nut products in recent years have been traced back to processing facilities, not home preparation. The nuts can look, smell, and taste completely normal. There's no way to detect it without lab testing. What you can do? Write the purchase date on your nut butter when you open it. Check the recall database monthly when you're using a product long-term. And if you have a large, warehouse-sized container you've had for more than a few months, take 2 minutes to verify it. It takes almost nothing to check. And the downside of not checking is something you don't want to experience. Item number 8. Spices and seasoning blends. This one surprised the food safety community when it first became a significant issue, and it continues to generate recalls. Ground spices, paprika, cayenne, cumin, black pepper, garlic powder, have been found to carry salmonella contamination. The issue is in how spices are processed and dried after harvest. Many spices come from international sources, and quality control standards vary significantly. The challenge for consumers is that spices are used in small amounts. A light dusting of paprika on roasted vegetables. A pinch of cumin in a sauce. You wouldn't expect a small amount of a spice to make you sick, but salmonella can cause serious illness at very low doses. I cook most nights at home, and I use a lot of spices. When I first learned that ground spices were a legitimate recall category, I went through my spice drawer for the first time with fresh eyes. I had some jars that were 3 or 4 years old. I had no memory of where I'd bought them. Industry sources have noted that spice recalls tend to affect store brand and discount brand products more frequently than premium brands, though no category is immune. Buying from a reputable brand with good supply chain transparency is a reasonable hedge. The practical move: clean out your spice drawer once a year. Discard anything more than 2 to 3 years old. And when you buy new spices, write the purchase date on the bottom of the jar with a marker. It takes 10 seconds and it matters more than you'd think. Your seasoning should add flavour, not risk. Item number 9, frozen fish and seafood. Seafood recalls are underreported in mainstream consumer media, but they show up consistently in FDA and USDA databases. The issues range from salmonella and listeria contamination to undeclared allergens to ciguatera toxin concerns in certain fish species. Frozen shrimp, tilapia, salmon portions, and seafood medleys have all appeared in significant recall events in recent years. One thing that stood out to me in my research is the global supply chain dimension. A significant portion of frozen seafood sold in the United States comes from processing facilities in Southeast Asia, Latin America, and elsewhere. Testing standards and documentation requirements vary, and it's not always easy for even major retailers to fully vet every product. I buy frozen shrimp fairly regularly. It's convenient, affordable, and versatile. And I'll admit I never once thought to check its recall status before opening this research. That's changed now. The frozen seafood aisle at Walmart or Costco looks perfectly organized and safe. And most of the time, it is. But the recalls do happen, and they affect products from name brands you recognize. What I recommend: when you buy frozen seafood, snap a photo of the packaging before you put it in the freezer. That way, if a recall is announced while you still have the product, you have the lot number and UPC code readily available. It's a simple habit that takes 3 seconds. Seafood is healthy and worth eating. Just check what you've got. Item number 10, chocolate and snack products. Let me end on something that I think people will really feel, because this category gets recalled for a reason most consumers don't expect. Chocolate bars, protein bars, granola bars, and various snack products have been recalled with growing frequency, and the most common reason is undeclared milk or tree nut contamination from shared processing equipment. Here's how it happens. A facility produces multiple products on the same equipment. One run includes almonds. The equipment gets cleaned, but not always to a standard that eliminates all traces of the allergen. The next product run picks up residue. The finished product contains a trace allergen that isn't on the label. For most people, this isn't a health emergency. For someone with a severe nut allergy, it can be fatal. What hit me when I started looking into this is how many snack products are made in shared facilities. The "may contain traces of tree nuts" label is a voluntary disclosure that some manufacturers include and others don't. The ones who don't include it may still be producing in a shared environment. Recalls in this category often affect products you'd find at the checkout counter: bars, bites, small snack packs. Things you grab without thinking. Things that go in a child's lunchbox without a second glance. If anyone in your household has a known food allergy, this is the category where you need to be most consistently checking recalls. The frequency is high and the consequences can be severe. Your snack should not be a liability. Here's the pattern I want you to see in all of this. Food recalls are not rare events. They are not limited to small, obscure brands. They happen across every category: meat, produce, frozen foods, pantry staples, baby products, snacks. They happen at companies you trust. They happen more often than most people realize. And the system is set up in a way where you have to opt in to getting this information. Recalls are publicly posted. Alerts are available. But nobody is going to call you at home. Nobody is going to pull the product out of your freezer. The stores don't always catch every item in time. The news doesn't cover every recall. The burden, in practice, falls on you. What I want you to take away from this is not panic. The food supply in the United States is actually safer than it's ever been in terms of systemic oversight. But safer overall doesn't mean zero risk in your specific refrigerator. 10 minutes a month. That's what this takes. 10 minutes to check the FDA and USDA recall databases. 10 minutes to look at the lot numbers on the items your family eats most often. 10 minutes to sign up for email alerts on the product categories you buy regularly. The people who get caught by these recalls are not careless. They're just not paying attention to a system that doesn't do a great job of reaching them. Now you know it exists. Now you know what to look for. Most people won't take these steps. They'll assume their grocery store handled it. They'll assume they would have heard about it. You're not most people. That's why you're here. If this video was useful to you, please give it a like. It genuinely helps more people find this kind of content. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing this kind of practical, honest consumer information. Leave me a comment if there's a category or product you want me to dig into. I read every comment and I pulled topics from what people are actually asking about. Next week, I'm going to be looking at something that's been quietly shifting in the grocery industry. Price changes that aren't showing up the way most people expect. The package looks the same. The price looks the same. But something is different. I'll see you then. Take care of yourself and your family. You've got this.